Whether by chance or circumstance, Charles Baughman did not experience the combat often linked to the life of a Confederate soldier from Virginia. Instead, he spent much of the Civil War in southwestern Virginia, initially with the 21st Virginia Infantry and later with the Odie Battery, preparing for battles but only sporadically engaging in minor clashes. His unit was reassigned to the Army of Northern Virginia in 1864 and positioned in the trenches of Petersburg, but he was on medical leave during the most notable action his battery faced, the Battle of the Crater. He also missed the opportunity to attend the surrender of the Army of Northern Virginia at Appomattox. Thankfully, Baughman's somewhat atypical wartime experiences are documented in 63 of his letters, now preserved in the Museum of the Confederacy's Baughman family collection. Charles Christian Baughman was born in Baltimore on August 8, 1842, the third of 5 surviving children of George Baughman, born in Pennsylvania, and Mary Jane Greer Baughman, born in Louisiana. In the late 1840s, the family moved near Salem, Virginia. By the start of the Civil War, they resided in Richmond. On April 21, 1861, Charles Baughman and his brothers Greer and George, the latter living in Amite County, Mississippi, enlisted in the prestigious F Company of the 1st Regiment Virginia Volunteers. The Baughman brothers soon faced their first encounter with Union forces. On May 31st, Baughman recounted a skirmish with a Union gunboat at Aquia Creek. "We had a brief engagement here 2 days ago in the evening. In the morning, we seized a small sloop with 2 men aboard, and by evening, a steamer appeared, aiming, we believed, to recapture the sloop. It fired 2 shots at our battery before we responded. The first was a canister shot that passed over a company drilling on the shore. The second landed 50 yards short of the beach. Then our battery opened fire and continued until darkness halted the exchange. We fired about 12 shots from our battery, while the ship, reportedly the Pawnee, fired 15. We were at camp when the firing began, quickly armed ourselves, and marched to within half a mile of the battery to be ready if they attempted a landing. Our gunner claims 3 of his shots hit the ship, including a shell that struck its deck and likely caused casualties. F Company was formally mustered into Confederate service as Company F, 21st Virginia Infantry, on June 20, 1861. A week later, George Baughman resigned and later supported the Confederate cause through quartermaster duties. Greer Baughman transferred to Company C of the Hampton Artillery Battery in July. Charles Baughman chose to stay with his company, marched to Western Virginia, and joined the Army of the Northwest. Like many new soldiers, Charles soon became ill. On October 22nd, he wrote, "A week ago today, I set out to rejoin my regiment, but after 2 days of travel and covering only 12 miles, I collapsed and stayed at a house for 2 more days. Then I sent my knapsack in a wagon heading this way and returned. Dear Mother, please don't worry. I collapsed from weakness, having left before I was strong enough to carry my knapsack. I also suffered greatly from chest pain. When I walk far or exert myself, I can't breathe deeply without severe pain. Upon returning, I discovered I also had yellow jaundice, which, as you know, is minor. I believe, dear Mother, that if you came here, you might secure my discharge. And if Minnie is well enough, I'd love to see you here." Months later, Baughman received a medical discharge at Romney and left the regiment. Had he stayed with the 21st Virginia Infantry, he would have joined Stonewall Jackson's foot cavalry and participated in the well-known campaigns of the Eastern Theater. Determined not to remain a civilian for long, Charles Baughman re-enlisted in another elite Richmond unit, the Odie Battery, on March 24, 1862. His views on his new unit, led by Captain George Gaston Odie, are clear in a May 9th letter, where he discouraged his father from letting his younger brother, Emilius, join the artillery. He asked me to inquire if Captain Odie is accepting more recruits. In response, I'd note that Lieutenant Walker is in Richmond recruiting, but I advise against Emilius joining. Captain Odie is very strict, and I know Emilius would clash with him. Pop, you know M's temperament, and if I were you, I'd steer him away from any unit led by someone like Captain Odie. Besides, we're in a harsh region, and I doubt he could endure it. Like the 21st Virginia Infantry, the Odie Battery was stationed in Western Virginia, under Brigadier General Henry Heth. The battery's first major engagement was at Giles Courthouse on May 10, 1862. 5 days later, Baughman described the battle. "We fought last Saturday at Giles Courthouse and completely routed the enemy, driving them 6 miles to this spot on the New River, where it passes through a mountain gap. We had marched all night before the fight and were exhausted, but when the pickets started firing, I felt as alert as ever. Our gun was the first to fire and the last to stop. The enemy's losses, as reported to the general, were about 150 killed, wounded, or missing. Our losses were minimal, with no one in our company harmed. However, Confederate victories were not guaranteed. On May 31st, Baughman wrote to his brother Emilius, "You've likely heard of our defeat at Lewisburg on the 23rd. We were thoroughly beaten. I've heard bullets whistle before, but never in my life have they sounded as they did at Lewisburg." General Heth's failure to retaliate by avoiding a later skirmish did little to win his troops' favor. In a June 26th letter, Baughman wrote, "Due to General Heth's cowardice, we made a shameful retreat when we could have easily defeated the enemy and recaptured our artillery. The troops despise Heth and, if given the chance, would deal with him harshly. Oh, if we could just confront them, we'd make them pay. It won't be long before we get another chance to fight, as Colonel John McCausland isn't one to retreat." The fall brought the Kanawha Valley campaign and General Heth's departure, both welcomed by Baughman. On August 11th, he wrote to his mother, "From what I see and hear, I believe we'll soon advance down the Kanawha Valley. I hope so, as I'm tired of staying in camp with nothing to do but drill and stand guard." Despite early successes, the Confederates ultimately lost the Kanawha Valley to Union forces. For the rest of 1862 and throughout 1863, the Odie Battery, which became Company A of the 13th Battalion Virginia Light Artillery in the fall of 1863, saw no major battles. On April 25, 1863, Baughman wrote to his mother, "There's truly nothing to report. Everything feels so dull and unpleasant that I wish I could sleep for a month and not wake up." In May 1864, the Odie Battery left southwestern Virginia, transferring from the Department of East Tennessee to the Army of Northern Virginia. The unit moved east and took up positions in the trenches of Petersburg, where it stayed until November. The routine of trench life allowed Baughman to write frequent letters to his family, detailing military life and his thoughts on the war's progress. On September 23rd, after returning to camp following 2 months of chronic diarrhea, Baughman described trench life to his mother. "We rise at 5:30 in the morning, draw straws to decide who fetches water from a spring in the trenches, about 200 yards from our gun. Once the water arrives, we wash our faces, comb our hair, and start cooking breakfast. Our bread is baked in camp, but we cook the rest of our rations here. Every 2 or 3 men share a frying pan, and we all have coffee cups, tin cups holding about a quart, for boiling tea, coffee, potatoes, rice, beans, beef stews, or anything else we have. In the frying pan, we cook bacon, fry potatoes, apples, and so on. After washing dishes, we begin policing or sweeping the area, and by 9 a.m., everything is tidy. We pass the time as best we can until dinner at about 4 p.m. We finish eating and cleaning by 5 p.m. At dusk, they call for a work detail, and those not selected sit together, talk, and smoke until bedtime at around 8 p.m. when we all turn in, only to be woken by the guard at 5 a.m. the next day. The work detail usually finishes around midnight and then rests. We do little daytime work due to sharpshooters, but at night, they can't see us. As a non-commissioned officer, I am exempt from these details, only working when there's something to do at my gun, where I take my share. During the day, we watch our shells and those of the Yankees flying overhead. The Yankees never target our front line, so we don't fear their shells, which aim for our second line, 300 or 400 yards behind us. As the war continued and the Confederacy grew desperate for troops, the idea of enlisting black soldiers arose. On October 23rd, Baughman shared his thoughts with his father. Regarding arming black men, I must disagree. I'm fine with them serving as wagon drivers, cooks, or engineers, but I don't want one fighting beside me. The Army wouldn't accept it. Many, if not most, would refuse to fight if forced to serve with them. I've heard many soldiers' opinions, and none supported it. Most said they'd desert rather than fight alongside them. I think it's the worst idea possible and hope Congress never considers it. But if they do, I hope it's unanimously rejected. If such a law passes, it would spell the end of the Confederacy. On November 1st, Baughman reflected on the upcoming Northern presidential election. The presidential election is near, and soon we'll have a clearer sense of how long the war might last. I hope McClellan wins, but I fear Lincoln has such control over the North that he'll force his re-election. We'll know soon and must hope for the best. On November 6th, Lieutenant Colonel Edgar F. Mosley's artillery battalion relieved the 13th Battalion in the trenches. 2 days later, the 13th established camp southwest of Petersburg, with the OD Battery at Camp Walker. In a November 13th letter, Baughman wrote, "The shift from trenches to camp is very pleasant. I especially enjoy removing my shoes at night. The unit faced only minor skirmishes over the next few months." On February 6, 1865, Baughman wrote to his mother, "Some men are disheartened and ready to give up, but that sentiment isn't widespread. Most of us are determined to never surrender." Despite his resolve, the OD Battery surrendered at Lynchburg shortly after Lee's surrender at Appomattox, and Charles Baughman was paroled in Richmond on May 16, 1865. After the war, Charles Baughman stayed in Richmond, married Williet Harrison Stevens from Harrisonburg, and established Baughman Brothers, stationers and printers. He remained active in Confederate veterans groups, joining R.E. Lee Camp No. 1, United Confederate Veterans, and attending OD Battery reunions. Charles Christian Baughman passed away in Richmond on March 3, 1909.